Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the fanfiction guy. Back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Awakens Element's Power. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. All men are not created equal. That was the truth society taught me at the age of 4. A truth marked on my skin with bruises. A lesson etched into my memory with pain. But it was also the last time I would ever feel powerless. It was just another day at the preschool in Mizudafu. The sun shone brightly, casting golden rays across the playground. Children ran around, caught up in their world of innocence, laughing and playing. But not all of us were laughing. A small boy, barely 4 years old, sat on the ground, crying. His tiny arms covered his face as 2 other children stood over him, laughing. A third child stepped forward, arrogant, cocky, and already feared by everyone. Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo demanded that the crying boy acknowledge him as the strongest, the best. The boy whimpered in response, unable to speak. That was when I decided to intervene. My shoes crunched against the gravel as I moved forward. I wasn't brave, I was scared. But something deep inside told me this was wrong. I shouted for them to stop. The 3 of them turned to me, and Bakugo's crimson eyes narrowed. He sneered, questioning what a quirkless loser like me could do. I declared that I didn't need a quirk to do the right thing, which only amused him. Then the confrontation escalated. They shoved me and I fell to the ground. Fists and kicks followed. I tried to cover my head, but it was futile. Pain spread across my body, sharp and overwhelming. My vision blurred with tears. Then it happened. A fire ignited within me, not on my skin but deep inside my chest. Heat surged through my veins like magma, tightening my chest. I couldn't breathe. I screamed as my body erupted in flames. Flames burst from my arms, my chest, and even my back. My body glowed with intensity, and though the pain was indescribable, so was the power. Bakugo stumbled back in shock. Flames surged forward with every breath I took, twisting the world into a haze of smoke and burning air. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but the fire didn't listen. I raised my hand, and fire danced in my palm, wild and alive. Just as it surged forward, everything went dark. After that, I lost track of what happened. Adults rushed in, teachers called for help, and the fire wouldn't stop. They took me to the hospital, but my body was too hot to touch. My flames scorched even the metal of the stretcher. No cooling device worked, and no doctor could get near me. My body was shutting down under the weight of my own power. They had no choice but to call for someone with real control over ice, someone strong enough to extinguish even the fiercest fire. Someone long forgotten. In the psychiatric wing, a nurse hesitated outside a room before slowly opening the door. Inside sat a pale woman, her white hair tied back, her hands resting calmly on her lap. She stared out the window, lost in thought. The doctor gently addressed her, explaining that a child was burning alive and needed her help. At first, her gaze didn't shift, but something in her eyes flickered like the soft glow of moonlight on ice. When she heard about the child, she whispered, "A child?" At the hospital, chaos reigned. Nurses scrambled with cooling equipment, machines screamed warnings, and in the center of the room, Izuku Midoriya stood, her eyes red and swollen as she watched her son lying on the scorched bed, flames still liking his arms and legs. She cried out for help, pleading for someone to save her baby. Then, the temperature in the room dropped. A sudden breeze swept through the emergency ward as the door opened, revealing Rei Todoroki in a long white coat, her eyes calm, her steps silent. Inko gasped, recognizing her as the number 2 hero's wife. Rei nodded softly and moved forward, undeterred by the heat that singed even the walls. Her hands moved gracefully in the air, and crystals of frost formed around her fingers. She spoke softly, reassuring the child that he was not alone, that he was just scared. A soft blue glow spread from her palm, and mist coiled around Izuku's burning body like a soothing blanket. Slowly, the flames began to dim, the blinding heat giving way to warmth. His glowing skeleton faded beneath returning skin. Izuku trembled, his eyes fluttering open for just a moment, calling for his mother. Inko stepped forward, tears pouring down her cheeks. Rei turned her eyes to Inko, nodding gently, assuring her that Izuku was stable now and that the worst was over. Izuku's body was scarred, his breath shallow, but the fire had stopped. From that day on, everything changed. The days following the incident were heavy, but not with fear. There was relief. Izuku Midoriya had survived. He spent 2 full days unconscious in the hospital's recovery wing, where monitors beeped quietly in rhythm with his breathing, and a cool mist filled the room to regulate his body temperature. The fire had finally gone out, thanks to Rei Todoroki, and doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize his vitals. Inko never left his side. Not even once. Then, on the morning of the 3rd day, something miraculous happened. A nurse gently shook her shoulder, announcing that Izuku was awake. Inko bolted up, rushing to the bed, her heart pounding. There he was sitting up weakly, eyes half-lidded, staring at her. But he looked different. His once unruly green hair had turned snow-white, soft and silky, glowing faintly under the hospital lights. His skin was radiant, smooth and pale like freshly fallen snow. But the biggest change was in his eyes. They were no longer soft green, they were a piercing, vibrant blue, like twin sapphires glowing with silent power. His voice was soft and raw as he called for his mother. Inko burst into tears, hugging him tightly, careful not to squeeze too hard. She was overwhelmed with relief that he was awake and okay. But as she pulled back and saw his glowing face again, she blinked in disbelief, questioning what had happened to him. Soon after, a doctor entered the room, tall and calm, clipboard in hand. Inko turned toward him, confusion filling her eyes. The doctor explained that the changes were not uncommon, though she struggled to understand. In rare instances of intense quirk awakenings, particularly with elemental-type quirks, children experience physical changes as their bodies adapt to the new energy flowing through them. In Izuku's case, his quirk, Elementalist, was likely extremely powerful. The violent awakening had triggered a full-body evolution, revealing his true nature now that the quirk was active. Inko gazed at Izuku, who blinked at her in confusion, still sleepy. She whispered that he was beautiful, brushing his white hair back. Izuku tilted his head and remarked that he looked weird. Inko smiled softly, assuring him that he looked like the boy he was always meant to be. From the doorway, Rei Todoroki observed quietly, her expression unreadable, yet her eyes held warmth, a spark, perhaps a memory of when her own children were young and smiling. She murmured to herself that fire wasn't the only thing burning in this boy, he was destined to be extraordinary. The room was quiet, filled only with the steady hum of machines and the gentle breeze from the humidifier. Rei stood in the doorway, her white coat lightly frosted from the intense cooling quirk she had used on Izuku. She hadn't intended to linger, but the sight of Inko holding her son rooted her there for a moment longer. When Inko looked up and met Rei's gaze, tears brimmed in her eyes. Without hesitation, she got to her feet and approached Rei, then dropped to her knees. Her voice cracked as she expressed her gratitude, acknowledging that Rei had saved her baby without a second thought. Rei's eyes widened slightly as Inko bowed deeply, her forehead pressed against the cool tile floor. Beside her, little Izuku slid off the hospital bed and wobbled over, mimicking his mother. He bowed as well, trembling slightly, and whispered his thanks for saving him. Rei blinked, taken aback by the heartfelt words. She hadn't heard such warmth in a long time, words that weren't clinical or detached. Kneeling in front of them, she gently placed a hand on Inko's shoulder and another softly against Izuku's cheek. She reassured them that there was no need for thanks, sharing her own fears for her children and the pain of almost losing one. Her voice trembled, but she steadied herself, caressing Izuku's cheek one last time. His skin was warm, like sunlight in early spring. She whispered to him that he was a strong boy, stronger than he knew, and urged him to protect his heart. Izuku nodded slowly, his bright blue eyes locked with hers. Inko took Rei's hand in both of hers, expressing that she owed her son's life to her. If Rei ever needed anything, she would be there. Rei smiled softly, asking only that Inko raise him with love. Then, without another word, she stood and walked toward the door, where a nurse awaited with a wheelchair to escort her back to the mental ward. She paused briefly, casting one last look over her shoulder at the mother and child she had just saved. She quietly promised that she would see Izuku again someday before she left. Days passed, and everything had changed. The sky was bright, the air cool from the rain the night before, but the halls of Aldra Elementary felt unusually tense. Whispers buzzed with fear, curiosity, and awe as Izuku Midoriya stepped through the school gates. His presence was overwhelming, not loud but commanding. His snow-white hair framed piercing, vibrant blue eyes that seemed to glow. His skin was pale yet radiant, and around him was an energy that felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. Each step he took caused the gravel underfoot to crackle with energy. He remained silent, and the children who once laughed at him now stepped aside. Those who whispered behind his back avoided eye contact, and even teachers paused mid-sentence as he walked by. Then there was Bakugo Katsuki, standing in the middle of the corridor with arms crossed and jaw clenched. His lackeys whispered nervously behind him. Bakugo's eyes narrowed as he saw Izuku approach. He growled, questioning if Izuku thought he was special now that he had awakened his quirk, reminding him that he still needed help and had passed out like a loser. Izuku continued walking, unfazed. Bakugo grabbed his shoulder, demanding his attention. Without breaking stride, Izuku raised his hand toward a nearby classroom door. Water from a mop bucket inside bent unnaturally, swirling into a perfect sphere and rocketing toward them with precision. The water splashed against Bakugo, soaking him completely. He fell flat on the corridor floor, coughing in disbelief, his pride more bruised than anything. Silence enveloped the hallway. Izuku paused briefly, glancing over his shoulder at Bakugo, his eyes glowing with a faint azure hue. He coldly told Bakugo to stop looking at him, then walked away, leaving a stunned Bakugo behind and a hallway of kids who would never view Midoriya Izuku the same way again. Time passed like a whisper on the wind. The fire that once threatened to consume young Izuku Midoriya had long since died down, replaced by a cold, controlled storm. Years later, in Aldra Junior High, Izuku had become a name that commanded attention not because he bragged or showed off, but because when he walked down the hallway, everyone stepped aside. He was no longer the frail, timid child that others mocked, nor the boy Bakugo had called Deku as an insult. Now, he was a quiet force, spoken of with a mixture of awe and fear. His piercing blue eyes seemed to see straight through people, and his snow-white hair gave him an almost ethereal aura. A boy shaped by fire, now ruled by an ice-cold presence. The classroom lights dimmed as the projector buzzed to life. The class was going through the usual lecture on quirk history, but to Izuku, it was far from boring. It was the origin of everything. The teacher narrated about the first sign of superpowers, a newborn baby who emitted light. Images flashed on the screen, glowing babies, panicked crowds, medical chaos. Ever since that moment, people all over the world began to develop quirks, with no clear cause or explanation. Soon, the supernatural became ordinary, and dreams that once seemed impossible became everyday reality. Now, about 80% of the world's population had a special ability, and in this superhuman society, heroism stood above all. The slide shifted to colorful images of pro-heroes smiling and saving lives. But to Izuku, those images faded into background noise. Outside the window, the world moved on, unaware of the storm building nearby. The clock ticked past 10 a.m. Civilians packed the streets near Tataden station workers, students, parents all just trying to get through the day. And then it happened. A man, once ordinary, found himself cornered. In a moment of desperation, he had snatched a woman's bag. When two off-duty heroes confronted him, panic consumed him. His quirk, one he never fully understood, spiraled out of control. His body swelled, muscles ballooning grotesquely as veins surged and his eyes turned wild. His clothes tore apart as he grew nearly 20 feet tall, letting out a guttural scream as concrete cracked beneath him. His cries of despair echoed through the plaza, and chaos erupted. Civilians ran, panic spreading like wildfire. Then silence fell. Up above, standing calmly on a nearby rooftop, a lone figure watched the rampage. White hair caught the morning sun, and a black coat swayed in the breeze. One hand rested in his pocket, while the other was raised slowly, shaped like a gun. Izuku Midoriya's glowing blue eyes narrowed. With a single word, he unleashed compressed air through his fingertip, shooting it out like a railgun blast. The projectile struck the villain's shoulder, causing him to stagger in agony. Another shot followed, this time to the thigh, and the villain collapsed onto one knee, unable to support his warped body. But Izuku didn't deliver a third shot. Instead, he watched as the man's mutation began to shrink, the overclocked quirk stabilizing now that the adrenaline and rage were severed from his body. A faint gasp rippled through the fleeing crowd as they wondered who had intervened. But by the time anyone looked up, Izuku Midoriya had already vanished, slipping back into the shadows of the streets. No interviews, no hero landing, no declaration of justice, just 2 words, and the chaos ended. Back at Aldra, Izuku entered the classroom quietly. No one noticed he had even been gone. He slid back into his seat, opened his notebook, and took down notes like any other student. Inside his mind, he replayed the moment again, analyzing his actions. He clenched his pen slightly, adjusting the way he held it, thinking about the force he had used and how he needed to work on his control. The homeroom buzzed with energy as students laughed, showed off their quirks, and ignored the piles of handouts in front of them. Their teacher, Mr. Hoshino, an older man with kind eyes but a tired tone, stood at the front of the class holding a stack of papers. He clapped twice to get their attention, but no one listened. He raised his voice, reminding them that as third years, it was time to start thinking seriously about their futures. That got a few groans, and some students slouched in their seats. Others began fidgeting with their quirks more aggressively. The teacher sighed and dropped the stack onto his desk with a thump. He announced that he was passing out career plan sheets and asked them to fill them out by next week, knowing most of them aimed for the hero course. Chaos erupted as kids began flashing their quirks in excitement, wanting to show off. Flames, electricity, crystals, and stretchy limbs filled the room. All of them wanted to display their abilities except for 2. Midoriya sat silently in his seat, scribbling something in his notebook. His pristine white hair caught the light, and his icy blue eyes stayed fixed on the page, drawing what looked like a villain profile and multiple counter-strategies. He was used to the noise and didn't care for it. At the back of the class stood Katsuki Bakugo, arms crossed, scowling. He didn't need to show off, everyone already knew his strength. There was only one person he was interested in outperforming now, Izuku Midoriya. The teacher barked again, reminding them of the no quirk usage rule in class, and reluctantly, the students stopped. Then the teacher glanced at the sheet in front of him, and a curious smile tugged at his lips. He announced that they had a couple of real big dreamers in the class, Bakugo Katsuki and Midoriya Izuku, both of whom applied for UA High School's hero course. The class fell silent, every eye turning to the 2 boys. Whispers broke out instantly, with students expressing disbelief at 2 classmates applying to such a prestigious school. Bakugo stood tall, popping his knuckles with a smug grin, declaring his determination to not just get into UA but to be the best. His gaze slid sideways, glaring at Izuku, who didn't even look up from his notebook. He clicked his pen shut, closed the book calmly, and finally looked up with eyes so sharp they made even Bakugo flinch. He reminded Bakugo to focus on himself, suggesting he might not survive the exam. And just like that, the tension in the room shifted. He walked out of the classroom for lunch, hands in his pockets. The class froze for a moment, as if time had stopped. Bakugo's eye twitched. The silence shattered with a chorus of whispers. They commented on his presence, calling him ghostly and terrifying, mentioning a rumor that he had taken down a villain at Tatadin Station all by himself. They speculated about his powers, but Izuku Midoriya paid no attention to their chatter. His focus was on what lay ahead: UA High School, the next battlefield he intended to conquer. Afterward, the final bell rang at 4 p.m. The sun dipped low, casting an amber glow over everything. Students began pouring out of Aldra Junior High, the crowd thinning as they split off into different streets and alleyways. Izuku walked alone, his black and white school shoes lightly tapping the pavement. His snow-white hair fluttered with each step, and his piercing blue eyes remained fixed ahead. Suddenly, A voice called out to him, laced with venom and years of unresolved bitterness. It was Bakugo Katsuki, smirking and glowing faintly. He taunted Izuku, questioning if he thought he was a big shot just because he had intimidated some classmates. Izuku continued walking, unbothered. Bakugo clicked his tongue and moved closer, but Izuku paused and turned his head slightly, revealing one glowing blue eye. That single eye radiated power, making Bakugo freeze. In a cold, quiet voice, Izuku warned Bakugo to stay in his lane and not to challenge someone stronger than him. Bakugo's mouth twitched, ready to retaliate, but something held him back. Izuku turned and walked away, leaving Bakugo behind. Near the station bridge, Izuku walked beneath the familiar overpass near Tadadin Station, a shortcut he had taken countless times before. But today felt different. As he reached the midpoint of the bridge, a nearby sewer cover rattled violently. With a sudden explosion of foul-smelling sludge, a twisted mass of slime and eyes emerged from the manhole. A villain. The creature cackled, claiming Izuku would be its perfect host. Before he could react, the villain lunged, engulfing him in a suffocating wave of sludge. Izuku struggled to breathe as the disgusting liquid invaded his mouth and lungs. The villain demanded to be let in, but in that moment, everything went white. Then the air around the bridge dropped in. Pressure. For the first time, the sludge villain felt fear, realizing it had made a grave mistake. Inside the sludge, Izuku's eyes snapped open, glowing brighter than the sun. He declared that the villain had picked the wrong vessel. Confused, the villain realized Izuku was resisting. As heat began to build within the sludge, a low hum vibrated in the air, like something ancient awakening. Suddenly, a violent surge of steam burst from the center of the sludge, causing the villain to screech as it was blown back against the tunnel wall. From the center of the steam, Izuku emerged, unscathed and confident, with glowing blue eyes and hair that danced like flames. He raised his hand, condensing the humidity around him into a thin sphere of water. He taunted the villain, asking how it would handle control. The orb shot forward, transforming into a sharp whip mid-air and striking the villain across the face, sending chunks of sludge splattering against the bridge walls. The villain screamed in panic, but Izuku was just getting started. With both hands raised, he snapped his fingers, launching a compressed air bullet infused with steam. It sliced through the villain's form, causing it to howl in desperation. Izuku advanced slowly, deliberately, declaring that the villain had chosen the wrong person to ambush. Another blast followed, and the villain collapsed into a half-melted pile of gunk, unable to reform. Silence enveloped the scene as Izuku stood over the defeated creature, his cold blue eyes surveying the aftermath. He remarked that the villain had had its fun and sent a whirlpool of water swirling around it, flushing it back down into the sewer with a powerful burst. With that, Izuku adjusted his collar, cracked his neck, and casually walked off the bridge as if nothing had happened. Suddenly, the sewer lid blasted open again, this time from the inside, as a booming voice echoed through the tunnel. All Might emerged, scanning for the villain he had been pursuing. Instead of a battle scene, he found a broken trail of steaming slime scattered like a defeated creature. The remaining sludge villain screeched in terror, flinging itself at All Might's feet, trembling. It begged to be taken away, fearing the boy who had defeated it. All Might blinked in confusion, looking at the villain and then noticing a plastic soda bottle rolling at his feet. He picked it up, realizing that it was the villain's form. The villain nodded frantically, explaining that Izuku had turned it into soup and played with it, leaving it feeling powerless. All Might narrowed his eyes, glancing back toward the mysterious boy who was now halfway down the street. He pondered the boy's power, recognizing it as something he had never seen before. With a heavy cap click, he secured the villain in the bottle and looked once more at the fading white-haired figure, wondering who he was. All Might was already bounding through the city skyline, aware that time was running out. He needed to return to base quickly. He didn't notice the plastic bottle slip from his pocket, light as air, falling into an alley near the Tituan shopping district. A moment later, a loud crack echoed through the air as the bottle burst under the boot of Katsuki Bakugo. His usual cocky smirk vanished as green sludge surged upward. What was happening? Before he could react, the Sludge villain, filled with rage and a burning need for revenge, latched onto him like a parasite. "You look like him. I'll take your body instead." Screams echoed through the crowded street as the villain rampaged, using Bakugo's explosive quirk erratically, blasting random buildings and igniting chaos. Heroes arrived on the scene: Backdraft, Death Arms, Kamui Woods, and others struggling to get close due to the explosions and thick smoke. Damn it! That kid's quirk is making it impossible to restrain the villain. Where is All Might? Elsewhere, walking calmly down the sidewalk, Izuku Midoriya felt a sudden gust of hot wind from afar, followed by a familiar boom. He stopped, narrowing his eyes. Only that mutt causes this kind of mess. Without hesitation, he bent his knees, and a twist of wind erupted around him as he launched into the sky, wind currents carrying him faster than the eye could track. Within seconds, he hovered above the district. He muttered to himself, "You again," as the smoke parted. Below him, chaos reigned. Civilians were screaming, heroes were stuck, and Bakugo was barely visible, struggling inside the villain's body. Midoriya extended his palm, and instantly the air turned freezing cold. A storm of ice shards rained down, not to harm, but to extinguish the flames and trap the spreading sludge. The crowd looked up, gasping at the white-haired teen floating like a ghost in the sky, his cloak flapping from the wind pressure. He landed softly, his steps silent as he approached the slime villain. "You made the biggest mistake." He clenched his fist. "That by angering me twice today." The sludge villain's eyes widened in terror. "No, wait." A massive spike of earth shot from the ground, slamming into the villain like a hammer, sending chunks of goo flying. Midoriya followed with a water whip, slicing the goo clean off Bakugo's body. Then came the wind blast, a spiraling gust that compressed the villain into a tight ball of mud, flinging it away from everyone. With a crack, Midoriya caught Bakugo as he fell, tossing him onto the ground. "Next time, try not to be useless," he said coldly, walking away. The heroes watched in stunned silence. "Who is that kid?" As the smoke cleared, civilians stared in awe at the scene. The slime villain was now just a puddle of goop sealed inside a concrete trap, steam rising from it. The ground was iced over in places, shattered and torn up elsewhere, evidence of power far beyond a normal middle schooler. All Might, still hidden in the crowd in his scrawnier form, had witnessed everything. His eyes widened. "That boy," he whispered under his breath. "He's terrifyingly powerful. Precise. Efficient. He analyzed the situation and acted before any of us could. Is he really a student?" He clenched his fist. That look in his eyes, calm, ruthless, focused. Just like me at my peak. Meanwhile, the pro-heroes began to regain their composure. Backdraft rushed to check on Bakugo, while Death Arms and Kamui Woods stared at Midoriya. "Kid, that was incredible. Where did you learn to fight like that? What's your name? Are you aiming for UA?" But Midoriya just gave them a glance, sharp and distant. "Don't praise me for doing what you all couldn't." He walked past them, hands in his pockets, the wind bending around his presence. The heroes fell silent. Even the civilians felt a strange reverence. A hush followed Midoriya's every step. Moments later, as he walked through the street alone, someone chased after him. "You?" Bakugo appeared, his uniform scorched, face dirted, and eyes burning with humiliation. Midoriya didn't stop. Bakugo stormed ahead and grabbed his shoulder roughly. "I didn't need your help," he barked. "You think saving me makes you better than me? You think I owe you now?" Midoriya slowly turned his head, his expression unchanged. "You almost died." "Shut up!" Bakugo screamed. "You don't know anything about me. You're just a freak who thinks he's some kind of hero." "No." Midoriya's tone dropped like ice water. "I'm not a hero. I just don't like trash hurting people." He swatted Bakugo's hand off him and turned again, walking away without looking back. Bakugo stood frozen, hand trembling. Midoriya continued his walk, heading home as the sun dipped low on the horizon. His glowing blue eyes flickered in the golden light, his snow-white hair catching the wind. From behind a building, All Might watched him with narrowed eyes. "Izuku Midoriya, he murmured to himself. You're going to change everything. The skies had darkened into a blend of orange and purple by the time Izuku Midoriya reached home. From the outside, it looked like a modest, neatly designed house on the edge of Mizudafu. But upon stepping inside, it was clear the house was far more than just modest. Spacious and modern, with polished floors and minimalist interiors, this was the kind of home that whispered quiet wealth. No one in the neighborhood questioned it. Most assumed his mother had a good job or perhaps some inheritance. No one could imagine a middle schooler funded it. He stepped inside and locked the door behind him. The moment his shoes were off, his phone buzzed. New email, sponsorship offer, HeroWare Tokyo. New message, your latest track hit 5M views. Transfer complete. 1,200,000 Japanese yen received from HeroTube. He exhaled, calm and controlled. Midoriya made his way through the house. One section led to a high-tech studio setup, soundproofed and fitted with gear most adults would envy. Another part resembled a designer clothing showroom, filled with unopened boxes. Brands loved him. Even though they didn't know his identity, they recognized the presence. The mysterious HeroTuber who broke down hero battles, composed original theme songs, and sometimes uploaded footage of him fighting villains, edited so no one could trace it. He was anonymous, dangerous, irresistible. He opened one of the recent packages, a matte black jacket from a famous fashion brand, and smirked slightly. He rarely had to shop anymore. His wardrobe constantly refreshed itself. Midoriya changed out of his school uniform. Beneath it, his lean, muscular body stood as a testament to years of hard training. His build had the sharp V-taper of a gymnast or martial artist, shoulders wide, waist tight, everything defined and compact. He looked at himself in the mirror and gave a quiet nod. Then, walking to a room off to the side, he opened a cabinet. Inside were dozens of neatly organized notebooks, battle analysis, training logs, quirk studies, surveillance notes on villains and heroes. Izuku sat down, cracked his fingers, and started writing. Later that night, he was editing his next HeroTube video. Voice masked, visuals crisp, and beats designed by him, he was a one-man empire. He paused to read a comment that had been pinned thousands of times, questioning the identity of a mysterious fighter who vanished after displaying incredible skill. The comment speculated whether he was the rumored Demon Prince. Midoriya chuckled softly at the nickname, whispering to himself about how little they knew. He gazed out the window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. Meanwhile, deep inside a pro-hero conference room, certain individuals were replaying the footage of Midoriya's recent exploits. All Might, still in his civilian form, stood near the back, arms crossed. Officials discussed how a middle schooler could possess such skill, noting how he had stopped a villain faster than any patrol unit. The lack of identification and trace was concerning, but the level of control he displayed was even more alarming. All Might remained silent. He already knew he had to meet the boy not as a fan or a symbol, but as a teacher. The room was heavy with tension as heroes and officials tried to process the footage of Midoriya dispatching a villain with remarkable precision. Suddenly, the door opened. Principal Nizu, the genius animal who ran UA High, entered, calm and collected, balancing a cup of tea in one paw and a tablet in the other. He greeted All Might with a nod and proceeded to display a detailed profile of Izuku Midoriya on the wall. The room fell silent as the screen shifted through images and data showcasing Midoriya's achievements, trophy shelves, award ceremonies, and academic certificates, all of which had gone unpublicized. Nizu commented on Midoriya's quiet brilliance and the danger he posed if someone were to be on the wrong side of him. An officer remarked that Midoriya didn't seem like the type to be involved in wrongdoing, to which Nizu agreed but noted that he was not one to follow orders blindly. The screen showed surveillance photos of Izuku in combat, demonstrating his quirk, Elementalist, which granted him access to the natural elements. Nizu highlighted Midoriya's remarkable control during a past incident, noting that he acted faster than any of the heroes present. The room gasped when Nizu revealed that Midoriya had applied for UA High alongside Katsuki Bakugo, who had also been involved in the same incident, albeit less gracefully. The vast UA examination hall buzzed with nervous energy as hundreds of hopeful students sat in rows, trying to focus while Present Mike enthusiastically explained the practical exam's rules. Midoriya leaned back in his seat, uninterested, his sharp blue eyes scanning the pamphlet in his hand. He noted his assigned Battle Center B with a faint smirk. Across the room, Katsuki Bakugo was assigned to Battle Center A, unaware that Midoriya was also participating. Suddenly, a tall boy with glasses, Tenya Iida, stood up, raising his hand to address what he perceived as inconsistencies in the explanation. He pointed out the lack of clarity regarding the zero-pointer robot and the time constraints. Demanding professionalism, the entire hall turned to him, and a few rolled their eyes, while Present Mike continued with his upbeat demeanor. Iida's gaze fell on Midoriya, who was casually scribbling in a black notebook, seemingly unfazed. Iida accused Midoriya of not taking the situation seriously, but Midoriya's calm voice cut through the room, urging Iida to focus on the exam instead of trying to impress others. The atmosphere shifted as Iida clenched his fists but ultimately backed off, unable to match the pressure Midoriya exuded. Murmurs spread through the crowd, with students questioning who Midoriya was and why he seemed to command the room. Present Mike noted the tension with playful enthusiasm as students were directed to their battle zones. As Midoriya stood and walked out of the room, he was a calm storm ready to shatter expectations. The bus ride to Battle Center B was quiet until Iida resumed speaking, marveling at the elaborate facility designed to simulate a real urban environment. Midoriya sat by the window, his sleek black and blue UA tracksuit fitting his athletic build, while a simmering energy lay beneath his calm exterior. He chose not to respond to Iida, who continued to talk, oblivious to Midoriya's disinterest. While Midoriya didn't appreciate the earlier remark, he assumed Iida was serious about becoming a hero. Midoriya slowly turned his head, his blue eyes glowing faintly as he tilted it slightly. He noted that Iida was still talking and added that he didn't like wasting time, especially before a workout. Iida, flustered and red in the face, backed off and sat down. The rest of the students remained awkwardly silent, casting glances at the snow-haired boy with an unnerving presence. The bus pulled up to Battle Center B, which resembled a deserted section of a real city perfect for chaos. Students began stepping off the bus, stretching, checking their gear, and preparing their quirks. Midoriya stood up slowly, pulling on a hooded jacket over his tracksuit top and tightening the gloves on his hands. Whispers circulated among the students about his background, speculating whether he was a pro's child or if he was a black belt in multiple martial arts. No one knew who he was, and that was how he liked it. As they lined up at the massive entrance gates, Present Mic's voice boomed from the speakers overhead, reminding everyone that there were no countdowns in real life. The gates flung open, and everyone hesitated for a split second except for Midoriya, who was already gone. In a blur of wind, dust, and sparks, he shot into the city with incredible speed, his feet gliding off bursts of compressed air and frost. The students blinked in shock as the white-haired figure vanished ahead of them, a nearby camera drone zooming in to follow him. High above, in the UA observation room, Nizu sipped his tea and smirked, noting Midoriya's impressive speed. The moment he entered Battle Center B, the world seemed to slow down for everyone else. Then, a burst of flame shot from his heels, cracking the pavement beneath him as he spun midair, laughing with a wild grin and his piercing blue eyes blazing with energy. He challenged the robots, diving forward and delivering a powerful kick that sent one flying apart in a shower of sparks. With each movement, he swirled through the battlefield like a tornado, fluid and almost choreographed. He launched himself midair, executing a front flip and crashing down with a twin-flamed dropkick that crumpled another robot beneath him. The crowd of students watched in stunned disbelief, questioning how he was achieving such feats without any support items. In the UA observation deck, pro heroes leaned closer to the monitors, intrigued by his performance. Aizawa raised an eyebrow, while others expressed their astonishment at his skill and control over his quirk. Back on the ground, Midoriya faced a six-pointer that attempted to flank him. He pivoted mid-spin and launched himself horizontally, dragging fire through the machine's chest before delivering an explosive kick to its head. Standing tall amidst the wreckage, he cracked his neck and declared that he was already bored after just 1 minute. He had torn through dozens of BattleBots, leaving a trail of destruction from one end of Battle Center B to the other. Smoke curled in the air, and burnt metal littered the streets, yet he felt unchallenged. Climbing the side of a building, he landed silently on the rooftop, observing the chaos below. As he watched the other examinees struggle, he noted their sloppy footwork and panic. Leaning back casually, he propped his hands behind his head, taking in the scene with a smirk. The building rumbled slightly as an explosion rang out in the distance, but he remained unfazed. He flicked a pebble at a nearby camera drone, causing it to spark and drop, further showcasing his playful confidence. Meanwhile, the pro-heroes were captivated by his actions. Nizu commented on his ability to gather data while waiting for a stronger challenge. That challenge soon arrived as the arena shook with a thundering boom. Dust clouds filled the air, and the ground split open, revealing the zero-pointer, a towering monster of steel. Students fled in terror, but Midoriya's grin widened at the sight. He stood up slowly, flames licking at his heels, feeling invigorated by the challenge. As he surveyed the battlefield, he noticed a girl pinned under a large chunk of rubble, her leg trapped. While others ran for their lives, Midoriya dashed from the rooftop in an instant, a sonic boom erupting from his legs as he soared through the air, leaving a glowing trail behind him. He hovered just above the girl, wind swirling beneath him to soften his landing. She looked up weakly, and he assured her that he had everything under control. Raising one hand to the sky, he summoned dark clouds that twisted and churned above the arena, casting shadows over the field. With his eyes glowing electric blue, he prepared to demonstrate his power, ready to take on the challenge that lay ahead. His voice dropped lower, indicating the gravity of the situation. It was clear that provoking him had been a mistake. Lightning pulsed through the sky like veins, and then he brought his hand down sharply. Kirin. A blinding bolt of thunder, shaped like a dragon, descended from the heavens. The zero-pointer didn't have time to react before it was struck. The ground trembled as a shockwave rippled outward. The massive robot erupted in a burst of light and sound, vanishing in an instant. The silence that followed was overwhelming. Everyone in Battle Center B froze, even the other bots, which short-circuited and collapsed. From the smoke and scorched earth, Midoriya stepped forward slowly, the wind swirling around him like a cloak, his fire-fueled boots hissing with heat. The girl he had saved, Ochako Uraraka, stared at him in awe, still too stunned to speak. He didn't look back. He expressed his annoyance, stating that he had warned them not to bore him. High above, in the command room, the pro-heroes were left speechless. Midnight had her jaw dropped, and Snipe blinked in disbelief. Aizawa finally muttered in astonishment, while Nizu was already noting the potential he saw in Midoriya. As the final buzzer echoed across the testing grounds, the remaining robots powered down. Proctors began guiding the exhausted applicants toward recovery tents. But Midoriya was already walking off the battlefield, hands in his pockets, completely unfazed. Ochako was being gently lifted onto a stretcher by bots and taken to Recovery Girl. She kept glancing back at the silver-haired boy who hadn't even told her his name. She whispered to herself, wondering who he was. Midoriya continued on, grabbing his futuristic-looking gym bag and slinging it over his shoulder. His tracksuit bore scorch marks from his own fire, but he seemed indifferent. As he walked past a vending unit, he casually tapped the screen, retrieved a high-protein bar, and unwrapped it with one hand. He took a bite and remarked that it tasted bland, but he kept chewing anyway. Nearby, a few other examinees whispered and pointed at him, but no one dared approach. They didn't even know his name, only that he had destroyed a zero-pointer with a lightning dragon and walked away as if it were nothing. They wondered aloud who he was, expressing disbelief that this was just a normal exam and questioning if he had even broken a sweat. After finishing the protein bar, Midoriya wandered to a corner of the testing area where a maintenance spout leaked cold water. Without hesitation, he grabbed an empty bottle, filled it, and poured the water over his head and down his back. Steam hissed off his body as the cold water met his heated skin. His lean, powerful frame glistened, steam rolling off his silver-white hair like mist. He sighed in relief, feeling the cool sensation calm his nerves and rebalance his overheated body. His tracksuit clung to him now, half-drenched, but he didn't seem to mind. He pulled out his phone, slipped in his noise-canceling headphones, and tapped on a playlist filled with lo-fi beats, trap, and synthwave. His lips moved slightly as he vibed with the music, eyes closed, letting the sounds wash over him while the other applicants dealt with their exhaustion and nerves. No one dared approach him, not when he exuded the aura of a lone king, powerful, untouchable, and unknown. He leaned back against the wall, one foot up, casually scrolling through his phone. He mused that while the exam had been fun, he hoped UA had more to offer than just robots. From the corner of his eye, he noticed a few drones still flying, likely recording his movements. He smiled lazily and gave them a small salute without looking directly at them, hoping Nizu enjoyed the show. And with that, the silver-haired boy continued to vibe in his own world, headphones on, mind relaxed, while the world around him was still recovering from the storm he had unleashed. In the UA staff room after the entrance exam, massive screens lit up with names, scores, and video replays from each testing site. The teachers were seated around a large table: Aizawa, Hound Dog, Midnight, Snipe, Present Mike, Cementos, and Nizu at the head. The attention in the room was focused on two names flashing at the top of the scoreboard. First, unknown student code, Midoriya Izuku. Rescue points, 60. Villain points, 120. Total, 180. Second, Katsuki Bakugo. Rescue points, 0. Villain points, 77. Total, 77. Present Mike raised an eyebrow, exclaiming that Midoriya was a monster, highlighting his impressive feat against the zero-pointer. Aizawa, arms crossed and eyes narrowing, noted that Midoriya had been completely composed, controlling his output and demonstrating multi-element usage, suggesting a highly evolved quirk. Midnight leaned forward, tapping her nails on the desk, revealing that Midoriya had no media presence or public records, but his entrance form was impressive, filled with accolades and certifications. Nizu smiled brightly, recognizing that they had a ghost in the system. The results were remarkable, with Midoriya scoring nearly triple that of the second highest student. Hound Dog growled, noting how Midoriya made everything look like a game, appearing relaxed and unbothered. Snipe mentioned the lightning technique, questioning if it was from overseas. Cementos confirmed its similarity to elite combat techniques used by heroes from East Asia, but Midoriya executed it as if it were second nature. Nizu looked around the room, declaring that they had someone very special in their midst, a wild card. He urged everyone to keep an eye on Izuku Midoriya, as he was bound to shake UA to its core. Aizawa's voice was low as he expressed hope that the other students could keep up. 2 weeks had passed since the UA entrance exam. The air in Midoriya's room buzzed softly with the strum of an electric guitar. He sat on the edge of his bed, shirt off, his lean muscles glistening slightly from post-workout tension. His white hair fell slightly over his headphones as his fingers danced effortlessly across the strings, producing smooth, haunting, and powerful notes. He was fully immersed in his music when the door swung open. His mother, wearing a fuzzy hoodie and holding an envelope, beamed with excitement as she announced that something had arrived in the mail. Her voice was filled with pride. Her cheeks had a faint blush, perhaps from a bit of wine, but her smile was genuine. She held out a sleek black envelope adorned with a gold UA seal. Midoriya raised an eyebrow, surprised by the speed of its arrival. He stood up and took the envelope, flipping it over in his hand, admiring its elegance. He smirked at his mom, suggesting they watch together. Inko nodded excitedly, plopping down on the bed as Midoriya tapped the seal. The envelope hissed, and a hologram projected into the air before them. It was All Might, radiating heroic energy. "Hello, young man," he boomed, his classic grin lighting up the room. "If you're seeing this, it means you've been accepted to the prestigious UA High School Hero course." Midoriya sighed, having anticipated this moment. All Might continued, "Normally, I'd give a speech, but you've accomplished something extraordinary. Not only did you defeat the zero-pointer while saving another student, but your overall score was the highest in years." Another screen appeared beside him, showcasing the scoreboard. Izuku's name gleamed in gold with a total of 180 points. And so, young man, on behalf of you, I say this: welcome to your future. The hologram faded. Midoriya smirked, tossing the envelope onto his desk. He felt a surge of excitement. Inko was already tearing up, overwhelmed with pride. Her baby boy was going to be a hero, a real one. Midoriya offered her a playful side hug and grabbed his phone, opening his playlist. He knew he had to step up his game now. Outside the window, thunderclouds rolled in, as if responding to his newfound determination. Midoriya stretched his arms, leaning back against his desk, the image of All Might still fresh in his mind. His piercing blue eyes shifted to his mom, who was wiping a tear from her eye with a tissue from her hoodie pocket. He chuckled lightly, narrowing his eyes playfully. He asked her if her drink was because of his UA letter or another happy occasion. Inko blinked, caught off guard, and laughed sheepishly, admitting to a little wine due to her own nerves. Midoriya raised an eyebrow, teasing her about just a little. She confessed to maybe having 2 glasses, justifying it with the excitement of his acceptance into the best hero school in the country. He smiled softly, thanking her sincerely. Then he turned off his amp, reminding her that this was just the beginning and that UA would be tougher than anything he had faced before. Inko gave him a knowing look, acknowledging the challenges he had already overcome. She stood up, brushing imaginary dust off his head, reminding him that even if he was a mystery to the world, he would always be her Izuku, super strong, totally cool, and just a bit dramatic. He laughed, adding that she had forgotten to mention he was devilishly handsome. She giggled, then teasingly asked when he would bring home a girl. Midoriya groaned, waving her out of the room with a smirk as she walked away, laughing to herself. He shot her a half-serious glare, warning her to stop drinking in the middle of the day, tossing her a small packet and a bottle of water from his drawer. Inko caught the packet midair, blinking in surprise at his playful threat of banning her from drinking for 2 months. Midoriya shrugged, leaning back with a smirk, reminding her that actions have consequences. He pointed out that she had mascara halfway to her chin. Inko groaned dramatically but smiled, acknowledging that he was becoming more like his father, strict when it mattered. He raised an eyebrow, questioning if that was a compliment. She told him to take it however he wanted, calling him Mr. Alcohol Police, as she disappeared into the hallway. Midoriya chuckled, leaning over his desk to grab his phone and swipe through his playlist. He tapped a song, letting soft instrumental rock fill his headphones as he gazed out the window. Huh, he muttered, sipping a protein shake. Let's see what the future holds. As the door closed, he glanced at the black and gold envelope again, whispering to himself that it was time to raise hell. He picked up a dumbbell and began his night workout, the first as an accepted UA student. The next morning, the sun peeked through the curtains as Izuku stood before the mirror, adjusting his UA uniform with a calm, sharp expression. His snow-white hair was slightly tousled yet perfectly styled, and his piercing blue eyes held a quiet storm within. The uniform fit his lean frame well, hinting at the hours of training and discipline behind his composed demeanor. He grabbed his sleek, black futuristic-looking backpack, slinging it over one shoulder, with a pair of wireless headphones resting around his neck, low music playing softly. As he stepped out of his room and made his way down the hall, the aroma of fresh breakfast wafted toward him. Inko stood in the kitchen, dressed smartly for work in her usual office attire. She was neither drunk nor tipsy, just the composed, supportive mother she always was when it mattered. A small smile lifted her face as she placed a bento box into his bag. "Good morning, Izu. Everything packed?" she asked. "Yeah," he replied, nodding. "Thanks for the bento, Mom. I made it light but packed with energy. Just don't skip meals like last time. You'll need all your strength at you." Midoriya smirked slightly, promising to try but making no guarantees. The next day began like any other at UA High. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows as Class 1A quietly settled in. Lessons began with a loud bang, quite literally, as Present Mike burst into the classroom with his usual enthusiasm. "Good morning, Class 1A. Let's get ready to learn some English." A few students flinched, while Kaminari pretended to rock out on an air guitar, and Midoriya calmly took notes, unfazed. His accent was already perfect, and he even corrected a few of present mix examples when prompted, surprising even Iida. When English class ended, lunchtime arrived. Midoriya was quietly packing up his notes, preparing to head to the rooftop as usual, when Mina, Kirishima, and Kaminari blocked his path. "You're not escaping today." Mina grinned, linking her arm with his. "Come eat with us." "Yeah, you can't keep being the lone wolf all the time," Kirishima added, clapping him on the back. Before he could protest, the rest joined in, pushing him toward the cafeteria. Even Todoroki raised an eyebrow but remained silent. Seated at a large table, Midoriya pulled out his bento box while the others gathered around him. He didn't speak much, but he listened attentively, offering calm nods, slight smirks, and the occasional dry humor that surprised everyone. Jairu quietly remarked that he thought Midoriya was kind of cool. After lunch, they returned to class, and just as everyone settled down, All Might burst into the room with his booming voice, announcing his arrival in a dramatic fashion. The class perked up, with several students cheering at the sight of him in his Silver Age costume. He struck a pose and declared that they were beginning an important part of their training hero basics, starting with combat training. The walls shifted, revealing sleek suitcases lined up with each student's name. Inside were their hero suits, based on the designs they had submitted. The students rushed out excitedly, except for Midoriya, who noticed that there was no suitcase for him. Confusion spread among his classmates as they realized something was off. Yaoyorozu questioned if they had forgotten his suit, while Tokoyami observed Midoriya quietly following behind. Upon arriving at the battle center, the other students were dressed in various flashy and practical costumes, while Midoriya entered still in his uniform, briefcase in hand. Uraraka asked why he wasn't in his costume, and Midoriya took a moment before exhaling and clicking the case open, confirming his authorization. Nanites surged out like liquid light, wrapping around him in a stunning transformation. His body was encased in a black armored suit with glowing neon blue lines, the chest piece shaped like a glowing Y, and a hood covering his face. A high-tech energy sword formed in his hand, leaving everyone in awe. Todoroki narrowed his eyes, questioning the unusual suit, while All Might blinked in surprise, asking where it had come from. Midoriya explained that Melissa's shield had made it for him, and he had provided her with the design specs. Kirishima was astonished to learn she was David Shield's daughter, the top-tier American support engineer. Midoriya walked past them, glowing softly in his suit, and declared it was time to get started. Even All Might was taken aback by Midoriya's preparedness. Iida raised his hand, curious about whether they would be doing urban battles again in the same battle center used for their entrance exam. All Might laughed heartily and explained that they would be moving ahead 2 steps. He emphasized that while most villain confrontations occur outdoors, the truly dangerous villains often operate indoors, hiding in the shadows. He dramatically raised a finger to announce that today's class would focus on indoor combat training. The students would be split into villains and heroes for 2-on-2 battles inside a building scenario. He pointed to a digital screen displaying the scenario. The villains had hidden a nuclear weapon inside their secret hideout, and the hero's goal was to locate and secure it within a time limit. The randomized team list appeared on the screen, pairing Midoriya and Uraraka as Team A, heroes, against Iida and Bakugo as Team D, villains. Murmurs of excitement filled the room, especially at the thought of Midoriya facing Bakugo. As the teams were assigned their roles, Midoriya and Uraraka stood outside the designated building, given 5 minutes to strategize. Midoriya focused on the building, closing his eyes for a moment before revealing that he had memorized the floor plan. He activated a small holographic map from his gauntlet and leaned in to share his strategy. He explained that Bakugo would rush head-on while Iida would likely act as support, guarding the objective. They planned to split up, with Midoriya drawing their attention while Uraraka sneaked around from a blind spot. Uraraka was impressed by his strategy, and Midoriya nodded before retracting the map. All Might's voice echoed over the loudspeaker, signaling that their time was up and they could now enter the building. As Team A stepped inside, the countdown began, and the air was thick with anticipation. Midoriya adjusted his earpiece and instructed Uraraka to follow the plan while he handled the situation. He took a deep breath, and in the next moment, a surge of crackling electricity surrounded him as he activated his lightning armor mode, his body glowing with pulsing energy lines. Uraraka nodded and slipped away through the adjacent corridor, moving silently as instructed. Suddenly, Bakugo launched a sneak attack from the shadows, but Midoriya, enhanced by his lightning armor, dodged with incredible agility. He countered with a swift kick that sent Bakugo crashing into the wall. Midoriya remained calm, acknowledging Bakugo's predictability. In the monitoring room, All Might, Aizawa, and the other teachers watched intently. Aizawa noted Midoriya's new form, recognizing it as a temporary quirk amplification, while All Might expressed pride in Midoriya's growth. However, he emphasized that the real test would be how well Midoriya coordinated with his teammate. Back in the training zone, Bakugo retaliated with a series of rapid explosions aimed at Midoriya, but he was already in motion, his lightning armor crackling around him. With fluid movements, he began to dodge the blasts, moving with rhythm and style. The teachers in the monitoring room were amazed, with Kaminari and Kirishima commenting on Midoriya's unexpected dance-like movements during the fight. All Might was equally impressed, recognizing the skill it took to maintain unpredictable movements while in combat. Every time Bakugo charged in, Midoriya would lean, spin, or flip out of the way, lightning crackling with every move. Then he slid sideways, spun around, and heel-kicked Bakugo across the face mid-spin. Bakugo crashed into a wall, growling, smoke rising off his gear, demanding that Midoriya fight seriously. Midoriya twirled, caught himself with one hand on the floor, and backflipped to land in a crouch, lightning dancing between his fingers, reminding Bakugo that this was the best he could give. Mina watched in awe, noting how cool Midoriya looked. Siro added that he was impressively keeping rhythm in the fight. Kaminari whispered about how Midoriya had turned combat into a dance routine, while Todoroki observed closely, acknowledging Midoriya's intense training. As Bakugo stood back up, furious, Midoriya tapped his earpiece and instructed Uraraka to move. Bakugo, red-faced with anger, declared he would end this fight. He yanked the pin on his nitroglycerin gauntlet, charging it with a full payload. A massive explosion erupted, the shockwave ripping through the training floor. Smoke and fire rushed out like a beast unleashed, but Midoriya remained unfazed. He muttered, ready to ride the wave of chaos, as his boots activated their burst thrusters, launching him straight into the explosion. Everyone in the monitoring room gasped, surprised by his daring move. But then from the side of the explosion cloud, Midoriya shot out like a lightning bullet, twisting midair and kicking Bakugo's arm upward, redirecting the explosion into the ceiling. Concrete rained down like a meteor shower as Midoriya landed, lightning flickering around him. He pointed toward Uraraka's position, signaling her to act. Uraraka understood instantly and dashed forward, activating zero gravity by tapping her fingertips together. All the falling rubble suddenly froze midair, floating like a constellation of asteroids above her. She moved gracefully across the rubble-strewn floor toward Iida, launching debris in waves to block his vision and slow him down. Iida swerved between chunks of floating concrete, surprised by the sudden obstacles. Uraraka smiled, determined not to let Iida win. She tapped a metal beam, releasing it to crash in front of him, forcing him to halt. Meanwhile, Midoriya was a whirlwind of energy, lightning surging around him as his boots ignited. He launched forward with a fiery blast, skating across the floor with remarkable speed and grace. He spun into a low breakdance-style sweep, dodging Bakugo's explosion while tripping him in the same motion. Bakugo roared, demanding Midoriya to stop dancing and fight him straight. Midoriya grinned, flipping upright with a burst of flames, insisting that he was indeed fighting, just at a pace Bakugo couldn't match. With a midair spin, he kicked Bakugo hard across the back, sending him tumbling. Before Bakugo could recover, Midoriya expertly threw the capture tape, securing Bakugo's limbs with precision, just as Aizawa had taught him. Bakugo thrashed against the hold, but it was firm. Midoriya stood tall, fire venting from his boots, smoke curling around him like a storm. The monitoring room fell silent for a moment before erupting with murmurs of disbelief. All Might leaned forward, eyes wide with admiration. Meanwhile, Uraraka moved like a shadow. With the debris cloud distracting Iida, she floated 2 chunks of concrete silently. One zipped past his head, drawing his attention, while the second slammed against the wall beside him. That was all she needed. Uraraka rolled forward, touched the mock nuclear weapon, and with 0 weight, yanked it off its stand, holding it triumphantly above her head. A few days later, the morning sun barely peeked over the horizon as a flurry of reporters and media vans gathered outside the UA gates. Microphones were raised, cameras clicked, and voices echoed with questions about All Might's new role as a UA teacher. Students arrived, trying to weave through the noise, but the press focused solely on All Might. Suddenly, a sharp engine growl caught their attention. Midoriya calmly pulled up on his sleek black bike, wearing a dark hoodie with a suitcase strapped to the side. He slowed as he approached the UA gate, and a few reporters turned his way, mistaking him for a staff member until they recognized his youthful face. They bombarded him with questions about All Might's teaching. Midoriya didn't respond. Instead, he pressed a button on his bike's dashboard, activating auto mode, security path. The bike rolled itself toward the designated parking zone as Midoriya hopped off, walking without a word, bored expression and candy stick in his mouth, eyes scanning the chaos around him. Then, as a couple of overeager reporters tried to follow him, the UA security barrier activated, flaring into view as an invisible wall of protection around the school. The reporters stumbled back, wide-eyed, as Midoriya glanced back, noting the intrusion with a low comment about the reporters trying to sneak in. He walked off casually, ignoring the chaos behind him, heading toward the school building as the UA faculty prepared to deal with the press. In UA's Class 1A homeroom, Aizawa stood at the front, wrapped in his iconic yellow sleeping bag, his tired eyes scanning the room. He began by acknowledging the students' efforts in the previous day's combat training, having reviewed the video and results. His gaze landed on Bakugo, who stood with arms crossed and a smug expression. Aizawa bluntly reminded Bakugo of his talent and urged him not to act like a child. Bakugo confidently acknowledged this without flinching. Aizawa then turned his attention to Midoriya, who was lazily eating sugar candy at his desk. His snow-white hair fell gently over his bored, expressionless face, and his piercing blue eyes were barely focused on the front. The next day, Class 1A was surprised to find their schedule empty. They had been given the day off to rest, recover, and reflect. However, the following morning, as everyone gathered in homeroom still buzzing with leftover chatter from the USJ incident, the door slid open with a familiar thud. Aizawa entered, wrapped almost completely in bandages, his usual sleeping bag nowhere in sight. A few students straightened up immediately at the sight of him. Iida expressed concern, questioning whether Aizawa should even be walking. Aizawa waved him off with one arm, wincing slightly, and stated that he had experienced worse and was there to deliver something important. The class fell silent, recalling that the last time something important occurred, villains had invaded UA. Bakugo narrowed his eyes, questioning if it was another villain ambush or perhaps another test. Aizawa let out a tired sigh, assuring them it was not an attack but rather an announcement that the UA Sports Festival was officially happening. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Yaoyorozu worriedly asked if it was even safe considering the recent events at the USJ. Aizawa responded firmly, explaining that the sports festival was a declaration that UA still stood strong and was not backing down. The world was watching, and they would show what UA students were made of. He turned his gaze to Midoriya, narrowing his bandaged eyes, and declared that preparation would begin, leaving the class in Midoriya's hands. Midoriya stood up and nodded in understanding. With a final glance over the class, Aizawa turned and left the room, his footsteps quiet but firm. As soon as the door shut, the students broke into murmurs again. Kaminari grinned, expressing excitement about the sports festival, while Tokoyami muttered that it could also be terrifying. Midoriya adjusted his glasses and crossed his arms, emphasizing that they needed to train harder. If the villains were watching, they would show them their strength. After classes ended for the day, the students of Class 1A gathered their things, ready to head out. However, as they slid open their classroom door, they were met with an unexpected sight: dozens of students from other departments crowded outside, blocking their way. The hall was filled with whispers, glares, and curious stares from students in general studies, support course, and even business course, all interested in seeing the class that had survived a villain attack. Bakugo immediately clicked his tongue, his eyes twitching as his hands sparked with faint energy. He expressed his frustration at the crowd, questioning if they wanted to fight. Before Bakugo could say more, Midoriya calmly stepped in front of him, raising his palms slightly to halt him. He instructed everyone to stay silent and assured his classmates that he would handle the situation. The class paused, surprised at his calm but firm tone. Even Bakugo, gritting his teeth, clenched his fists but remained still. Midoriya stepped forward, facing the crowd of students outside. He adjusted his glasses and spoke with a steady voice, acknowledging the attention Class 1A was receiving lately due to the upcoming sports festival and the recent villain attack. He clarified that none of them had asked for the attack and that they survived because they had stuck together, trained hard, and risked their lives. He addressed the gathered students, challenging them to prove themselves at the festival, not by blocking hallways or throwing insults. Silence fell for a moment. Some students looked down, others folded their arms, and a few nodded slightly in respect. Midoriya then turned back to his classmates and led them forward. The crowd parted as Class 1A walked through, quiet but proud, with Midoriya leading at the front. Kirishima nudged Bakugo with a grin, commenting on how cool Midoriya had been. Bakugo grumbled, arms crossed, attributing his restraint to Midoriya's request. Uraraka chuckled, whispering to Midoriya that he handled the situation like a pro. Midoriya simply smiled, reminding them that they had bigger things to focus on now and it was time to prepare for the real battle. As Class 1A made their way down the hallway, the crowd began to thin, but not without lingering glares and muttered comments. Just as they were about to turn the corner, a loud voice echoed behind them. A muscular boy with short silver hair pushed through the crowd, TetsuTetsu from Class 1B, storming forward with clenched fists and a challenging gaze. He confronted Midoriya, questioning if he thought he was better than everyone else and accusing him of mocking their struggles. Midoriya, calm and composed, responded that he was not mocking anyone but would not back down if TetsuTetsu was looking for a fight. Without waiting for another word, TetsuTetsu charged forward, swinging his hardened fist toward Midoriya's head. However, Midoriya deftly sidestepped, grabbing TetsuTetsu's wrist and flipping him over his shoulder, slamming him onto the floor. Gasps erupted around them. TetsuTetsu groaned but quickly got back up, rushing in with more aggressive punches. Midoriya remained calm and focused, deftly dodging and landing precise hits to pressure points. His movements were fluid, conserving energy while demonstrating skill. After a series of rapid strikes, Midoriya swept TetsuTetsu's legs and pinned him to the ground, twisting his arm behind him. He stood up, dusting off his uniform as TetsuTetsu lay groaning on the ground. Midoriya clarified that in every underground tournament he had entered, he had never lost and had earned a title in the martial arts world that should not be underestimated. He looked around at the stunned crowd, stating that they called him the god of combat and reminding them not to underestimate him because of his appearance. The hall was dead silent, even Bakugo blinking in surprise. After Class 1B, Present Mike announced the next group, calling out for the support course. A group of inventors and tech geniuses marched out, some dragging heavy gadgets behind them. The crowd clapped politely, but it was nothing like the thunderous cheers for Class 1A. The General Studies course students walked out, appearing a bit more ordinary compared to the hero course. Some glanced around nervously, while others glared at the heroes, frustration and hidden ambition evident in their eyes. Finally, the business course students entered in formal-looking uniforms, many holding clipboards and tablets, already analyzing the potential marketing benefits of the festival. Aizawa, arms crossed despite his injuries, muttered to Mike from the side that this year's festival was going to be interesting. Mike grinned, acknowledging that with students like Midoriya leading the charge, it certainly would be. Down in the arena, Midoriya observed every group entering with calmness. His sharp green eyes scanned the competition. The support course posed no threat. The general studies students might have a few tough contenders, but the business course had no fighters. He glanced back at his classmates. Bakugo was still fuming, Todoroki was silently calculating, and Tsuyu was giving a calm wave to some students in the stands. Midoriya smirked to himself, thinking about the competition ahead. The energy in the stadium was rising. Everyone, heroes, students, spectators, could feel it. The UA Sports Festival was about to begin. As the last group of students entered the stadium, a sudden burst of cheers echoed across the arena, a little more wild than before. Midnight, the famous R-rated hero, elegantly walked into the center of the stage, her whip hanging loosely from her hand and a playful smirk on her lips. The audience, especially the adults, went wild, showering her with enthusiastic shouts. Mike chuckled awkwardly, commenting on the audience's over-enthusiasm this year, while Aizawa sighed heavily behind his bandages, urging him to focus on the festival. Down on the field, Midnight twirled her mic around her finger before addressing the crowd with a smooth and confident voice, amplified throughout the stadium. She welcomed the students of UA, the respected guests, and all the wonderful fans. Winking playfully toward the stands, she caused another wave of screams. Midoriya, standing at the front of Class 1A, adjusted his glasses with a neutral expression, recognizing that despite her professionalism, she was definitely an attention magnet. Midnight continued, shifting to a more official tone, announcing that today, the students would show the world and the pro heroes what they were capable of. She encouraged them to give it their all, show no regrets, and most importantly, have fun. With a loud snap of her whip in the air, the students tensed slightly, feeling the electric energy of competition, pride, and ambition swirl around them. Midnight smiled brightly and announced that the class representative of 1A would give the opening speech. The spotlight shifted immediately onto Midoriya. He exhaled slowly, stepping forward. Confidently, his UA uniform pristine, and his posture strong. Whispers broke out among the audience, speculating about his past achievements and skills. Standing at the podium, Midoriya faced thousands of eyes without a trace of nervousness. He adjusted his glasses and began, stating that today was not just another day, it was a statement. He emphasized that they would show the world the future, the new generation of heroes. Looking around, he met the eyes of students from every course and urged them to fight hard and fair, reminding them that winning wasn't everything. What mattered most was what they learned by standing up even when knocked down. He finished with a slight bow, and the stadium erupted into applause, even Midnight giving a small impressed nod. As the applause lingered, Midnight flicked her whip again, drawing everyone's attention back to her. She smiled brightly and announced that the first event for the UA Sports Festival was about to begin. Pausing dramatically, she cracked her whip through the air and declared it would be an obstacle race. Cheers, murmurs, and some groans erupted among the students as Midnight mischievously explained that they would have to complete a giant course filled with unpredictable obstacles that would test their mobility, quick thinking, and survival instincts. She added teasingly that there was no rule against fighting each other, just to avoid any serious harm. After the intense cavalry battle, Midnight announced with a smirk that they would take a short break for lunch before moving on to the final event. The students cheered, some dragging their exhausted bodies toward the cafeteria, while others silently brooded over their losses. Midoriya's team walked off the field, appearing completely relaxed compared to the others. As they entered the cafeteria, people threw glances at Midoriya, some in awe, others in fear, and some in pure jealousy. Midoriya calmly grabbed a giant tray stacked with food, rice bowls, sweet bread, energy bars, and several protein shakes. Sitting down, Tsuyu blinked and asked if he was eating a little too much. Momo tilted her head, questioning if that was a bit extreme even for high stamina training. Midoriya grinned as he shoved a piece of bread into his mouth, explaining that his quirk and control used up ridiculous amounts of energy. If he didn't refuel properly, he would crash midway. He added that the next round would be one-on-one battles, and he would need every bit of strength for what was coming. At another table, Bakugo gritted his teeth so hard that even his fork was bending in his hand. Kirishima nervously patted him on the back, suggesting he should chill out a bit. Midoriya noticed Bakugo's rage and smirked to himself but said nothing, focusing back on eating calmly and preparing for the real fight ahead. As the clock ticked down, the tension around UA grew thicker. Everyone knew the next battles would decide everything. After lunch ended, the students gathered back when Todoroki approached Midoriya, asking to speak with him in private. Midoriya nodded and followed him to a quieter corner behind the stadium walls. Todoroki leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and began to explain that he was the result of a quirk marriage, revealing the weight of his family legacy. He forced this on Midoriya's mother. All he ever wanted was a child who could surpass all might. Midoriya listened quietly, hands in his pockets, allowing Todoroki to express himself. Todoroki hesitated for a moment before continuing, expressing his desire not to rely on his father's fire during the tournament. He wanted to win on his own terms. Midoriya finally spoke, his voice calm yet heavy with meaning. He reminded Todoroki that he was not just his father's quirk, he was his own person and should not be burdened by his father's sins. With a small smirk, he added that if Todoroki truly wanted to defeat him, he would need to give it everything he had, or he wouldn't even come close. Todoroki's eyes widened slightly at Midoriya's blunt confidence, but a small smile crept onto his face as he nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, in the main area, Mineta was whispering excitedly to Kaminari and Siro about the girls having to wear cheerleading outfits. Just as their enthusiasm peaked, Aizawa entered, looking exhausted and wrapped in bandages. He gave them a flat stare and informed them that they were responsible for informing the girls of Class 1A about the cheerleading outfits. Mineta and Kaminari instantly paled, realizing the trouble they were in. They exchanged worried glances, feeling the weight of their predicament. Outside, Midoriya returned just in time to see them sweating as they approached the girls. He adjusted his glasses and muttered about how some people dig their own graves faster than villains. Back in the waiting area, Midoriya clapped his hands to gather the girls' attention. He calmly informed them that Mineta and Kaminari had planned to make them wear cheerleading outfits for the festival, but reassured them that they were not obligated to participate. After a brief silence, he added with a sly chuckle that if they wanted to thank Mineta and Kaminari, they were welcome to do so. With a swift motion, he grabbed both boys by their collars and tossed them into the group of girls. He smoothly suggested they could have their fun but reminded them not to break any bones, as they still had a sports festival to win. The girls' expressions darkened, and a terrifying aura surrounded them as they reacted in unison, expressing their outrage. Mineta and Kaminari, sensing the impending chaos, screamed and attempted to escape, only to be caught immediately. They cried out in apology as they were pelted with various items. Midoriya observed the scene from a distance, smiling calmly, noting that it was natural selection at work. Outside, Aizawa watched the chaos unfold through the window, muttering that they had brought it upon themselves while sipping from his juice box. After the lunch break, the students returned to the field as Midnight walked to the center with her usual confidence, announcing the final event, the one-on-one tournament battles. The crowd erupted in excitement as the giant screen displayed the matchup brackets. Class 1A and other departments watched eagerly as names flashed across the display. In the waiting area, Midoriya leaned against the wall, his sharp gaze focused on the screen. Next to him, Mineta and Kaminari sat slumped on the ground, covered in bruises and band-aids, twitching occasionally. Wondered aloud if they were still alive, to which Midoriya smirked before returning his attention to the board. Midnight announced the first match, Izuku Midoriya vs Hitoshi Shinszo. A calm expression crossed Midoriya's face as he adjusted his gloves and resolved to face Shinszo without using his quirk, relying solely on his skills. He informed his classmates about Shinszo's brainwashing quirk, emphasizing the importance of not responding verbally to him. Bakugo scoffed at Midoriya's declaration, while Kirishima encouraged him with a thumbs up. Tsuyu expressed her concern, reminding him to be careful. With a small nod, Midoriya walked toward the arena, the sun glinting off his glasses as the crowd cheered for him. As he entered the arena, Shinszo approached with a slouched posture and calculating eyes, creating a tense atmosphere. Midnight called for the fight to begin, and Shinszo attempted to provoke Midoriya, taunting him about being scared to lose to someone without a flashy quirk. Midoriya responded with a cold smile, choosing silence over words. In an instant, he rushed forward, demonstrating pure martial arts as he sidestepped Shinszo's reach effortlessly. With a fluid motion, he twisted Shinszo's arm behind his back, pinned him down, and swept him to the ground. Midoriya quietly acknowledged Shinszo's aspirations but reminded him that respect in combat does not equate to mercy. The buzzer sounded, declaring Midoriya the winner. He stood up and offered Shinszo a hand to help him up. Shinszo, confused, eventually accepted it. Midoriya encouraged him to train harder, recognizing his potential, before calmly leaving the arena and adjusting his UA jacket as if it were just another day. As the tournament continued, students faced off in various matches, some quick and others intense. However, none captured the crowd's attention like the upcoming match. Mike excitedly announced the highly anticipated battle, Izuku Midoriya vs Shoto Todoroki. The stadium shook with cheers as cameras focused on both competitors. Midoriya walked steadily to the arena, his green UA uniform fluttering in the wind, while Todoroki stood across the stage with a serious expression. In the stands, Bakugo gritted his teeth, recognizing that Midoriya was about to get serious. As Midoriya entered, he clenched his fists, and small sparks of fire danced around his right hand, surprising the audience. Mike exclaimed in shock, questioning when Midoriya had developed such intense flames, while Aizawa, still wrapped in bandages, noted that it wasn't Midoriya's quirk but rather a display of copying someone else's abilities. Clever brat. Midnight swung her whip, signaling the start of the match. Todoroki immediately launched a massive iceberg toward Midoriya without hesitation, the glacier roaring toward him like a tsunami. Midoriya smirked slightly and punched forward, unleashing a massive pillar of fire from his right fist, flames almost identical to Endeavor's erupting from him. The fire and ice clashed, creating a massive steam cloud that enveloped the arena. From within the smoke, Midoriya's cold voice echoed, questioning Todoroki's commitment to the fight. He stepped forward, flames liking his arms calmly, asserting that Todoroki was not fighting with everything he had and was not even trying to win. Todoroki gritted his teeth, visibly shaken, and declared that he was not using Endeavor's power. In response, Midoriya kicked the ground, sending a line of fire crackling toward Todoroki. The heat forced Todoroki to backpedal as Midoriya warned him that if he couldn't accept everything he was, he would never beat him or stand equal to him. Todoroki's mind flashed back to images of Endeavor, his cruel training, his mother, and his friends. His hand trembled as the left side, the fire side, began to flicker to life. Midoriya quietly reminded him that it was his power, not Endeavor's. The crowd held their breath as Todoroki's flames erupted, covering half the stadium in a blazing inferno. Todoroki raised his arms, ice on one side and fire on the other, declaring his identity. The commentator screamed into the mic, announcing that Todoroki was using both sides, signaling the start of the real fight. Midoriya tightened his fists, a slight smile on his face, urging Todoroki to show him everything he had. The stadium trembled as Midoriya wiped his mouth with his thumb, his right arm blazing like a sun, flames roaring so high that even the pro heroes in the stands felt nervous. Aizawa narrowed his eyes, recognizing the intensity of the moment. The commentator gasped, questioning how Midoriya knew Endeavor's signature move. Down on the battlefield, Todoroki stood tall, flames and ice swirling around him like a storm. He was finally fighting with everything he had, but Midoriya raised one burning arm high into the air, causing the sky to ripple under the pressure. He muttered under his breath, invoking his powerful move. The earth around him cracked and burned, steam rising as molten cracks formed under his feet, leaving the crowd in awe and fear. Todoroki's instincts screamed as he moved both arms forward, sending a monstrous blast of ice and fire toward Midoriya. However, Midoriya, calm and composed, slammed his flaming fist downward. The world turned white as a gigantic explosion of fire engulfed the battlefield, vaporizing Todoroki's attack completely. The shockwave shattered the stadium barriers, ripped apart the ground, and sent several nearby students tumbling backward. Even the pro heroes leapt up to shield the audience, and the entire arena looked as if it had been hit by a meteor. As the smoke covered everything, silence fell. Everyone stared wide-eyed as the smoke slowly cleared. Midoriya stood there, his uniform torn and still burning lightly with embers, his hand lowered. Todoroki was on one knee, panting and barely conscious, his ice and fire extinguished. Midnight raised her whip hesitantly, announcing Midoriya as the winner. The crowd erupted into cheers and gasps, marveling at the incredible match they had just witnessed. Midoriya calmly walked over to Todoroki and offered his hand, acknowledging the fight with respect. Todoroki, smiling weakly, accepted it. In the stands, Endeavor watched the scene, clenching his fists with a mix of pride and frustration. Bakugo, grinding his teeth, expressed his frustration at Midoriya's performance. Meanwhile, Aizawa muttered about the destruction caused by the match, knowing Recovery Girl would be upset. The commentator excitedly declared it the best match so far, unable to contain his enthusiasm. After the earth-shaking match, Midoriya made his way back to the waiting area, his sports uniform slightly scorched and torn at the edges, embers still flickering off him. The stadium continued to rumble from the aftereffects of his attack. Todoroki had already been taken away by Recovery Girl, a team of medical robots quickly rushing him out on a stretcher. Everyone stared at Midoriya as if he were a mythical beast that had casually descended onto the battlefield. Midoriya sat down heavily on the bench, breathing a little harder than usual. He took out a small bottle from his sports bag, an energy drink packed with sugar and electrolytes, and chugged it down in one gulp, noting that he had lost more stamina than he expected. He turned to Momo Yaoyorozu, who was still looking stunned from the previous match, and asked if she could make something to eat, preferably high energy. Momo stood up, her cheeks a little red, and quickly summoned her creation quirk. A small portable box appeared, filled with high-calorie energy bars, protein-rich food, and sweet buns. Midoriya nodded in approval, immediately taking a bun and devouring it while sipping another drink. Kirishima and Kaminari, watching from a distance, commented on Midoriya's unique abilities. After a few days of rest and light classes, Class 1A gathered again in their usual room. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement and nervousness. Aizawa stood at the front of the class, still wrapped in some bandages but back to his stoic self, holding a tablet. He informed the students that they would be going over their internship offers, and the projector displayed a long list. The students gasped at the numbers, and at the very top, by a significant margin, was Izuku Midoriya, with the highest number of offers out of the entire year. Even Todoroki, Bakugo, and others who had performed admirably were surprised. Midoriya's classmates acknowledged his leadership during the crisis, and Aizawa continued to scroll down the list, announcing that everyone would participate in the upcoming internship PRD. Just then, the door slammed open dramatically. Midnight strutted in, her whip casually draped over her shoulder, causing excitement among the students. She cheerfully greeted them, announcing that she was there to oversee something very important. Some of the class straightened up in their seats immediately. Midnight continued, her voice shifting to a more serious tone, emphasizing the importance of their hero names as their public identities. Aizawa nodded slightly at her and added that they would write their chosen names on the boards provided, with him approving or rejecting them based on appropriateness. Excited and nervous glances exchanged among the students, while Midoriya sat calmly, tapping his chin thoughtfully. Bakugo muttered from behind, arms crossed, that whatever name Midoriya picked better be good. Midoriya smiled slightly under his breath, deep in thought. The boards were quickly handed out, and everyone got busy scribbling down their ideas, some confident, others hesitating. Iida stood up first, slamming his board down proudly, declaring his name as Ingenium and stating he would inherit his brother's will. The class clapped for him. Uraraka followed, smiling warmly as she showed hers, Uravity. Mina cheered, giving her a thumbs up, calling it a cute name. Kirishima stepped forward next, announcing Red Riot with a grin full of fiery passion, which Midnight approved immediately. Mineta proudly displayed his own name, Grape Juice, prompting awkward applause from the class, with some trying to hold back laughter. Kaminari whispered that it sounded just like him. Finally, Izuku Midoriya stood up calmly, holding his board tightly. He flipped it around for everyone to see, Guardian King. The class fell silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of the name. Jairu remarked under her breath that it was actually really impressive. Midnight's eyes gleamed with approval, calling it a powerful name fitting for someone who carries the weight of others and leads them so naturally. Midoriya smiled lightly but said nothing, letting his chosen name speak for itself. In the back, Bakugo scowled, gripping his board and muttering about Midoriya always showing off without trying. After a moment, the room burst into excited chatter, everyone commenting on how perfect Midoriya's hero name was. Tokoyami murmured that Guardian King was a title worthy of respect. The atmosphere remained energetic as Midnight smiled warmly and encouraged the next student. Mina Ashido bounced forward excitedly, waving her board and proudly announcing Alien Queen. Midnight paused, tilting her head thoughtfully, suggesting that it might not be the best image for a hero and that something less intimidating would be better. Mina deflated a little, pouting as she returned to her seat. Aoyama then stepped forward dramatically, twirling in a sparkle of glitter and announcing Shining Hero, I can't stop twinkling. The entire class sweat dropped, and Midnight blinked slowly, trying to find the right words. She politely suggested that it was quite a mouthful and perhaps something shorter would be better. Aoyama dramatically clutched his heart, whispering about his artistry being denied. Bakugo then stomped up, slamming his board down with the name King Explosion Murder. The room went completely silent. Midnight gave him a flat look and instantly rejected it. Some students tried not to laugh, while Kirishima whispered to Bakugo to tone it down a little. Bakugo growled, grabbing his board back, visibly irritated. Meanwhile, others like Tokoyami, Momo, Iida, and Todoroki had their names approved smoothly. Midnight clapped her hands, smiling, and encouraged those with rejected names to work with her to find something better, emphasizing the need for strong, inspiring hero names. Midoriya watched quietly, sipping his energy drink and thinking that Bakugo's face was priceless. After some grumbling and heavy scribbling, the three who had their names rejected finally came up with new ideas. Mina jumped up again, holding her board proudly and announcing Pinky, which Midnight approved with a nod. Aoyama twirled dramatically again, presenting his new choice of Shining Hero, Can't Stop Twinkling, which was still very long. Midnight sighed but smiled, approving it as it suited his style. Finally, Bakugo stomped back, clearly irritated, and slapped his board down with Great Explosion Murder God Dynamite. The room fell into stunned silence again. Midnight pinched the bridge of her nose, muttering that it was slightly better, still violent but acceptable. Kirishima patted Bakugo's back with a proud remark, while Bakugo only grunted, still scowling. Midoriya chuckled under his breath, thinking that at least Bakugo got something he could live with. Midnight smiled brightly at the class, announcing that now everyone had their provisional hero names. It was time to move on to the next big step, internships. Midoriya sat at his desk, quietly flipping through the list of internship offers he had received. The others around him buzzed with excitement, comparing their offers. Looking down the sheet, Midoriya noticed something odd. There weren't many agencies looking for elemental-type quirk users. He frowned a little, knowing that elemental manipulation quirks were rare in Japan, and his versatile version made him a unique case. Among the many offers, one name stood out immediately, Endeavor's Hero Agency. Midoriya blinked in surprise, mumbling to himself about Endeavor himself sending him an offer. Todoroki, sitting nearby, glanced over sharply but said nothing, his face unreadable. Midoriya scanned the other offers again, realizing that aside from Endeavor, no other big-name hero agency specialized in elemental manipulation. He truly was standing alone in this category. Izawa, still half-wrapped in bandages, walked by Midoriya's desk lazily, noticing his thoughtful look. He remarked that it was natural for elemental quirks not to be common in Japan and that Midoriya would have to blaze his own path. Midoriya nodded silently, a small fire of determination lighting in his eyes. Kirishima leaned over with a grin, tapping Midoriya's shoulder and commenting on how huge it was to get an offer from Endeavor. Midoriya smiled lightly, acknowledging that he would have to think carefully, as it wasn't just about the biggest name but about where he could grow stronger. From the corner, Bakugo clicked his tongue but remained silent, secretly a little impressed despite himself. After school ended, Midoriya changed into casual clothes, grabbed his helmet, and hopped onto his bike. The engine roared to life as he sped off through the streets of Tokyo, his destination clear in his mind. Strapped carefully behind him were a cake box and a bouquet of fresh flowers. It didn't take long for him to reach his destination, a quiet, out-of-the-way mental hospital tucked between taller office buildings. Midoriya parked his bike, took a deep breath, and walked inside, holding the cake and flowers carefully. At the reception desk, he approached politely, gently asking to visit Rei Todoroki. The receptionist looked up, surprised for a moment, but then smiled and nodded, providing him with the room number while reminding him to be respectful as she was doing better these days. Midoriya bowed his head lightly in gratitude. As he made his way down the quiet, clean halls, he reflected on the purpose of his visit. He felt it was important to remind her that she was not forgotten, especially now with all the changes happening to her son. Finally reaching room 217, he knocked gently and called out softly, "Rei Todoroki-san?" From inside, a warm voice responded, inviting him in. Midoriya opened the door slowly, stepping inside with a kind smile, cake and flowers still in hand. He entered quietly, closing the door behind him. Rei Todoroki sat by the window, sunlight casting a soft glow over her pale features. She looked up at him with a kind but confused smile. Midoriya chuckled gently and placed the bouquet and cake on the small table beside her. He scratched the back of his head awkwardly and mentioned that it had been a long time since they had seen each other. He pulled a chair and sat down across from her, recalling a memory from years ago. He described a little boy playing outside who had lost control of his fire and how she had rushed over to help him. She had cooled him down and hugged him, reassuring him that he was not a monster. Midoriya's eyes softened as he revealed that the boy was him. Rei blinked slowly, surprised, as small memories flickered in her mind. She whispered in disbelief, realizing that it had indeed been him. Midoriya nodded, sharing how her kindness had meant the world to him as a child. He gently pushed the cake toward her, suggesting they celebrate a little, since she had saved someone that day. Tears welled in Rei's eyes as she felt a sense of accomplishment for the first time in a long while. Midoriya smiled kindly, noticing her emotions, and leaned back slightly to share another reason for his visit. He mentioned that he was good friends with her son, Shoto, and that they had been through a lot together. Rei listened intently, her hands clenching her dress as he continued. He recalled that Shoto had visited her a few days ago, and she confirmed it, her voice trembling with a mix of happiness and sadness. Midoriya reassured her that Shoto was doing great, strong and kind, and fighting hard to become his own kind of hero. Tears streamed down Rei's cheeks silently as he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, promising that she was not alone anymore. He placed the cake and bouquet on the table beside her, wishing her a good recovery and encouraging her to take her time to heal. Rei, still emotional, nodded appreciatively as she reached out to touch the flowers. Midoriya bowed respectfully before quietly leaving the room, the soft click of the door closing behind him. As he walked down the hospital hallway, sunlight filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow. He smiled slightly to himself, thinking that Shoto's family would be okay someday, and he would make sure of it. The scene shifted to Midoriya standing outside UA's front gate, a suitcase by his side containing his hero suit, ready for his internship. Beside him stood Todoroki, both prepared to head toward Endeavor's agency. Midoriya zipped up his jacket and adjusted the strap on his suitcase before glancing at Todoroki, casually noting that they were partners for now. Before leaving, he turned serious, recalling something important. He crossed his arms and muttered under his breath about Ingenium and Iida. Then, more firmly, he warned Todoroki that he had already warned Iida. Todoroki raised an eyebrow, curious. Midoriya's voice grew firm as he mentioned knowing about Iida's brother and what had happened with the hero killer. He expressed his concern that if he heard even a whisper of Iida getting involved in revenge during his internship, he would take action as class president. Todoroki let out a soft hum, acknowledging the need to keep an eye on Iida as they started walking toward the station. The scene ended with the two walking side by side, carrying the weight of responsibility on their shoulders. Before they left for their internships, a flashback played, showing Midoriya pulling Iida aside after class. He firmly gripped Iida's shoulder and led him into a quiet hallway where they could talk privately. Iida adjusted his glasses nervously, asking if something was wrong. Midoriya leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his gaze sharp and serious. He bluntly addressed Iida's change in behavior, noting that he had been acting differently, focused and angry. Iida looked down, fists trembling as Midoriya stepped closer, warning him against seeking revenge during his internship. He emphasized that as a friend and class president, he would intervene if necessary. Iida's eyes widened in shock as Midoriya reminded him that they were heroes and should never use their powers for revenge. After a long silence, Iida finally nodded in understanding. Midoriya gave his shoulder a reassuring pat, affirming that he was glad Iida understood. The flashback faded as the scene shifted back to Midoriya and Todoroki making their way to Endeavor's agency. As the train came to a stop, they stepped off the platform, each carrying their own suitcase. The summer sun blazed overhead, and a sleek, black car pulled up in front of them, its windows tinted and engine humming softly. A tall man in a black suit emerged from the vehicle, offering a slight bow. He informed them that he had been sent by Endeavor to pick them up, then opened the back door for them. Midoriya blinked in surprise as he placed his bag in the trunk. Once they were both inside, the car glided away from the station. Midoriya glanced at Todoroki, a small smile forming on his lips as he asked if Endeavor usually sent a fancy car for him. Todoroki, maintaining a neutral expression while gazing out the window, replied that it wasn't common. He suggested that Endeavor might be trying to impress them or perhaps was serious about the internship. Midoriya chuckled softly, feeling a mix of excitement and determination. He tightened his grip on his suitcase, which held his hero costume. His expression sharpened with focus. He was not just there to train, he was there to push beyond his own limits. The cityscape rushed by as the car sped toward Endeavor's agency, the anticipation of the upcoming training days weighing heavily on them. The car finally slowed down in front of a towering, state-of-the-art building Endeavor agency. The glass reflected the sunlight harshly, and the huge logo at the top blazed like fire itself. Midoriya and Todoroki stepped out as the chauffeur gave a respectful nod before driving off. Todoroki muttered something under his breath, causing Midoriya to chuckle slightly as he slung his suitcase over his shoulder. Inside, the agency buzzed with energy pro-heroes and sidekicks moving around swiftly, flames occasionally lighting up parts of the training halls. Endeavor was already waiting for them, his massive figure radiating a pressure that made the air feel heavy. He gruffly noted their tardiness, arms crossed and his flaming beard crackling lightly. Midoriya bowed politely, while Todoroki simply nodded. Meanwhile, far away in another part of the city, Iida was at his own agency, under Pro-Hero Manual. Manual, a good-natured hero, was explaining patrol procedures, but Iida's mind was elsewhere. He clenched his fists tightly, memories of his brother Tensei's injuries flashing before his eyes. His body was stiff, and the righteous anger bubbling inside him was barely contained. Despite Midoriya's strict warning and the clear danger, he had made his decision. He pulled out a folded piece of paper, a map showing the rumored location of the hero killer. He couldn't sit still. Back at Endeavor's agency, Midoriya's eyes narrowed slightly as he stared at his phone, a gut feeling creeping in. He hoped Iida wasn't doing anything reckless. The stage for new battles was slowly being set. After a few minutes of waiting, Endeavor led Midoriya and Todoroki into his massive office, the walls lined with hero memorabilia, fireproof awards, and battle trophies. The atmosphere was heavy, as if the very room itself carried the weight of a lifetime of battles. Endeavor stood behind his huge desk, arms crossed, flames flickering lightly around his shoulders. He began to speak in his deep, commanding voice, emphasizing that they were not there for a vacation but to become stronger. Todoroki remained silent, his eyes calm but focused. Midoriya straightened up, determined to absorb every word. Endeavor directed his sharp gaze toward Todoroki, instructing him to focus on mastering both sides of his quirk during patrol and combat training. Then his stern eyes shifted toward Midoriya, acknowledging his impressive performance during the sports festival while cautioning him about the recklessness of his technique. He warned that power without control could lead to losing not only the fight but also his body. Midoriya nodded seriously, sweat trickling down his temple, and affirmed his understanding. Endeavor grunted, stating that from now on, they would learn how to ignite, maintain, and extinguish their power at will like a true flame. He pointed at them, announcing that training would start the next day at 5 a.m. sharp, urging them to be ready to be broken and rebuilt. Both Midoriya and Todoroki nodded in agreement. After being dismissed, Midoriya clenched his fists with excitement, vowing to become stronger no matter what it took. An assistant hero led Midoriya and Todoroki through the agency to their shared room, which was simple but nice: 2 beds, a desk, and a large window overlooking the city. As they settled down, a sudden knock came at the door. Burnin, with her spiky green hair and energetic grin, entered the room, welcoming them to the Endeavor agency and hoping Endeavor hadn't scared them too much. Midoriya smiled awkwardly, while Todoroki simply nodded. Burnin leaned against the door frame, teasing Todoroki about his friendship with Midoriya, which he admitted quietly. She grinned widely, inviting them to join a group of sidekicks heading out for dinner that night as a welcome meal for the newcomers. Midoriya looked at Todoroki, who shrugged, and then he agreed with a smile. Burnin gave a thumbs up, telling them to be ready in 30 minutes before bouncing away. Midoriya turned to Todoroki, amused by Burnin's energy. Todoroki acknowledged that it wasn't bad. They began preparing for dinner, enjoying a rare, relaxed night before the intense training ahead. The next day, the morning of their internship's first day, began with a crackle of tension in the air. Midoriya, Todoroki, and the others gathered at the Endeavor agency lobby, where a line of sleek suitcases awaited the trainees. Each student was responsible for their gear, but Midoriya's case stood out immediately, pitch black, reinforced with chrome edges and glowing with faint blue lines. Without a word, he tapped the identification button on his suitcase. A brief pulse of energy rippled out, and then, with mechanical precision, the suitcase unfolded into motion. Metallic plates, wires, and segments surged outward, assembling around his body with a series of hissing locks and magnetic snaps. Within seconds, Midoriya was clad in the elemental nexus armor. As the battle continued, Midoriya and Todoroki moved like a perfect tag team. Midoriya controlled the battlefield with his elemental weapon, switching from Earth Hammer to Lightning Whip, keeping the villains on edge. At the same time, Todoroki unleashed precise ice attacks and fire blasts, syncing with Midoriya's moves without needing to speak. They simply understood each other's timing perfectly. Midoriya swiftly struck a villain trying to flank them, while Todoroki froze the ground behind him, preventing another villain from escaping. Burnin, watching from nearby, remarked on their impressive teamwork, and even Endeavor, arms crossed and observing carefully, gave a small approving nod, acknowledging their effectiveness in covering the battlefield. The villains didn't stand a chance, being taken down one by one before backup heroes even arrived. After their successful takedown of the villains, the real challenge began: paperwork. Midoriya sat at his desk at Endeavor's agency, slumped over with a pen barely hanging from his fingers, a mountain of documents stacked in front of him. His elemental armor was off, and he looked like all his energy had been drained. Midoriya groaned dramatically, resting his forehead against the desk in frustration. He lamented the amount of paperwork heroes had to handle. Burnin walked by, chuckling and reminding him that it was part of being a real hero. Midoriya whined, expressing that it felt like torture and that he would rather face 100 villains than deal with the paperwork. Todoroki, sitting calmly beside him and filling out his own forms, glanced over and dryly pointed out that Midoriya just needed to get used to it, as this was the routine after every mission. Midoriya pouted, lazily dragging his chair around and muttering about wishing he had stayed longer for desserts. Endeavor, observing from his office window, shook his head with a sigh, thinking about the younger generation. After enduring the endless paperwork, Midoriya finally had a moment to breathe. It was time for training. As the sun set over the agency's rooftop training ground, casting a golden glow across the city, Midoriya stood across from Shoto, his jacket tossed aside and his elemental nexus armor activated. He focused intently, forming a long spear-like construct in his hand, but this time he aimed for something new. Concentrating his fire manipulation into a single point, he shaped it like an arrow, the air shimmering around it from the intense heat. He prepared himself, adjusting his stance and muttering about the flaming arrow technique. With a sharp exhale, he launched the flaming arrow through the air. The arrow zipped forward, spiraling like a comet, and exploded against the reinforced target dummy at the far end of the rooftop. The controlled wave of heat radiated outward, and when the smoke cleared, the dummy was scorched black. Todoroki whistled lightly, impressed by Midoriya's progress. He noted that Midoriya was getting better at controlling the output, and it was much cleaner than before. Midoriya wiped the sweat from his forehead and grinned, acknowledging that he still needed to improve the speed and sharpness, perhaps even chaining multiple arrows together. They reset the training area, and Midoriya prepared for another round, determination burning in his piercing blue eyes. Meanwhile, across town, Iida moved carefully through the busy streets, his expression hidden under a low cap. He thought he was being discreet, but he was unaware that class president Midoriya had already tagged him. Before leaving for the internships, Midoriya had discreetly placed a small, undetectable tracker on Iida, a blend of his tech and elemental energy that was perfectly camouflaged. Inside Midoriya's jacket pocket, his phone buzzed softly. He pulled it out and glanced at the screen, revealing a minimap with a blinking blue dot indicating Iida's location, which was moving suspiciously fast away from his assigned area. Midoriya's eyes narrowed slightly, realizing Iida was trying to escape his watch. He chuckled to himself, sliding the phone back into his pocket and muttering a warning about doing anything reckless. Turning back to Todoroki, Midoriya resumed his training, but now part of his sharp mind was focused on tracking Iida's movements, ready to intervene if necessary. As night settled over the city, a calm mist rolled through the streets while Midoriya moved swiftly with the others on night patrol. The neon lights flickered above, and the world felt strangely quiet. Suddenly, Midoriya's phone buzzed again. He pulled it out, scanning the urgent notification that read, "Emergency alert, Iida status, injured location, Hosu City." Midoriya's expression darkened immediately. Without hesitation, he grabbed Todoroki's wrist and declared they were leaving. He activated a technique he had developed and mastered: Wings of Apocalypse, Dante's Symphony. His elemental nexus armor responded instantly, and the cape on his back ignited with elemental energy, shaping into massive wings that crackled with lightning, fire, and ice. With one powerful beat of those wings, Midoriya shot into the sky, carrying Todoroki with him effortlessly. The wind howled around them as they soared through the night air at incredible speed. Through his earpiece, Midoriya urgently contacted Endeavor, informing him that Stain had appeared in Hosu City and that they were moving ahead. Endeavor, recognizing the seriousness in Midoriya's voice, confirmed he was right behind them. Midoriya's eyes sharpened, glowing slightly under the moonlight as he gritted his teeth, determined to reach Iida. As they approached Hosu, a roar split through the air. A monstrous Nomu came flying straight at them. Midoriya's eyes narrowed sharply. Without hesitation, he released Todoroki in the air, trusting him to land safely, and surged forward with elemental energy. He confronted the Nomu, stopping its momentum with one gloved hand. The drones on his back shifted configuration, glowing intensely as blue flames ignited around his arm. In one decisive movement, the blue flames consumed the Nomu's head, disintegrating it instantly with a searing heat. The Nomu's body fell lifelessly to the ground, defeated. Midoriya floated down, his wings flaring dramatically behind him, landing softly next to Todoroki, who stared at him in awe. Midoriya adjusted his gauntlets, his voice steady as he prepared to move forward. Iida needed help. The two of them sprinted toward the source of the commotion where Stain awaited. The night was thick with smoke as Midoriya descended into the narrow alley. Flames still clung to his back and cape, burning fiercely, giving him a terrifying silhouette. Each of his steps echoed with raw power, causing the ground beneath him to crack slightly with the heat. In front of him, Iida lay injured, struggling to stand. Just a few feet away, the hero killer, Stain, stood with a bloodied blade in hand, turning to face the new arrival. Midoriya's piercing voice broke the tense air, revealing his frustration. He was focused on Iida first, urging him to stay down and assuring him that he would handle Stain. The ground around Midoriya crackled with elemental energy, a fierce wind picking up as he slowly turned his gaze towards Stain, his body ready to unleash everything. His hand moved calmly to his side, drawing out his weapon. The sword, sleek and sharp, hummed with power as it was pulled free, glowing with ripples of blue lightning and red flame tracing along the blade's edge. Midoriya pointed it toward Stain, his voice calm but carrying an edge that cut deeper than any sword. He acknowledged the infamous hero killer, expressing his disdain for Stain's actions. The flames behind him roared louder, casting his figure in a blazing crimson and shadow, while Stain grinned under his mask, liking his blood-stained sword. The clash of ideologies was about to begin, but Midoriya was not here for speeches. He shifted his stance, ready to confront Stain. Midoriya spun the sword once in his hand, the elemental energy crackling along its edge. His blue eyes gleamed with excitement and steel-cold focus as he challenged Stain to a battle of swords, eager to see who would emerge victorious. Stain's grin widened, his bloodlust evident as he accepted the challenge. With a sharp clang, Stain vanished from view, leaping at inhuman speed. Midoriya didn't flinch, his body moved instinctively, raising his elemental sword just in time to clash against Stain's jagged blade. The impact caused a burst of sparks and wind to blast through the narrow alley. The battle had begun. The alley echoed with the harsh sounds of metal clashing, sparks flying with every strike. Midoriya moved with a speed that even Todoroki and Iida could barely follow. Each swing of his elemental blade was calculated, brimming with precision. With a vicious turn of his wrist, Midoriya disarmed Stain, sending the villain's jagged sword clattering to the ground. Before Stain could react, Midoriya's fist, charged with crackling energy, slammed into Stain's gut, folding him over. Without missing a beat, Midoriya grabbed Stain by the collar and delivered a series of powerful punches. As Midoriya and Todoroki landed back on the ground, Endeavor finally caught up, his sharp eyes immediately locking onto the fading blue embers still surrounding Midoriya. The number 2 hero's face twisted in a mix of shock and concern as he questioned how Midoriya had blue flames, warning him of the danger. Midoriya casually dusted off his gloves, responding that he had trained with it until he could control it perfectly. Endeavor narrowed his eyes, stepping closer, his towering presence making even Todoroki tense. He explained that blue flames burned hotter than normal ones and emphasized the importance of caution. Midoriya nodded, unfazed, stating that if his body could handle it, it would be a waste not to use it. He glanced at the burned remains of the Nomu, noting that it had come in handy. Endeavor grunted, still unhappy but recognizing the truth in Midoriya's words. He warned Midoriya not to lose control, or he would end up causing more damage than just to the villains. Todoroki leaned closer to Midoriya, whispering that he was a bit scary when serious. Midoriya grinned mischievously, his white hair glowing under the moonlight and his piercing blue eyes burning even brighter. Endeavor crossed his arms, his shadow looming over both Midoriya and Todoroki. He informed Midoriya that he would face punishment. Midoriya blinked in confusion, questioning what he had done wrong. Todoroki, standing beside him, raised an eyebrow, also unsure of their offense. Endeavor's frustration grew as he pointed out that they had caught Stain, the hero killer, without permission, using lethal attacks without backup, and creating a battlefield in a public street. He emphasized the risk of using blue flames in the city. Midoriya opened his mouth to argue but quickly realized Endeavor had a point. Sheepishly scratching the back of his head, he tried to defend his actions by mentioning that he had minimized damage. Todoroki quietly reminded him that they had saved Iida, the civilians, and another pro-hero. Endeavor let out a heavy sigh, trying to restrain himself. He acknowledged their success but insisted they needed to learn proper reporting and authorization, reminding them they were heroes in training, not lone vigilantes. Midoriya and Todoroki exchanged glances, silently agreeing that Endeavor was right but still feeling frustrated. Midoriya cautiously asked what the punishment would be. Endeavor smirked, and it was not a friendly smirk. He informed them it would be mountains of paperwork for 3 days straight. Midoriya's face went pale, and he dramatically dropped to his knees, exclaiming that he would rather face heavy lifting or a deathmatch with Nomus than endure paperwork. Todoroki expressed his frustration about the paperwork, feeling it was worse than facing Stain. Endeavor, pleased with himself, welcomed the young heroes to the reality of being a hero. They returned to the agency after their mission, with Endeavor walking proudly, Todoroki remaining quiet, and Midoriya trailing behind, arms crossed and wearing a perpetual scowl. As they entered the office, Todoroki announced their return in a flat tone. The staff, including Burnin, looked up immediately. Full of energy, Burnin jogged over to greet them and quickly noticed Midoriya's gloomy demeanor. She playfully commented on his sour expression, but Midoriya turned to her with a deadpan gaze, warning her to step aside if she didn't want to face his wrath. The room fell silent, surprised by his intensity. Midoriya stormed past her, dramatically declaring his intention to begin his 3 days of torment, feeling as though he were heading to an execution. Burnin turned to Todoroki, bewildered by Midoriya's sudden change in mood. Todoroki sighed and explained that Endeavor had assigned Midoriya 3 days of paperwork as punishment, which he loathed even more than facing Nomus. Burnin nodded in understanding, feeling sympathy for Midoriya. Meanwhile, Endeavor chuckled to himself as he walked to his office, satisfied with his lesson in Desu. The following days became a chaotic routine for Midoriya, caught between endless paperwork and patrols. At his desk, surrounded by towering stacks of forms, his Elemental Nexus suitcase occasionally opened to provide him with pens and stamp pads, functioning like a loyal assistant. Midoriya appeared completely drained, spinning a pen between his fingers and muttering about his overwhelming workload. Burnin, passing by with coffee, couldn't help but laugh at the sight of Midoriya in his hero costume, looking battle-worn yet defeated by bureaucracy. However, when it was time for actual hero work, he transformed completely. Spotting a purse snatcher or a villain causing chaos, Midoriya would instantly regain his energy, dashing forward with impressive speed and bringing the villain down with dramatic flair, striking a heroic pose as civilians gathered around. He would confidently announce his presence, echoing the spirit of all might, and the crowd would cheer, some even filming him as his elemental armor glimmered in the sunlight. Watching from a distance, Burnin and Todoroki shook their heads, with Burnin commenting on how Midoriya seemed unaffected by his earlier struggles with paperwork. Todoroki, serious as always, noted that Midoriya was skilled at compartmentalizing his emotions. After several challenging days filled with patrols, paperwork, training sessions, and Midoriya's spirited speeches, their internship PRD finally concluded. On the last day, Endeavor gathered them in his office, arms crossed and a stern expression on his face as he assessed the young heroes in training. He acknowledged their efforts, particularly praising Midoriya, who stood there slightly bruised but trying to suppress a grin. However, Endeavor cautioned them not to let the praise inflate their egos, reminding them that real hero work was relentless and that they still had much to learn.